what was Raja Ram Mohan Roy's role vis-a-vis English education in colonial India? What role did Raja Ram Mohan Roy play in this extremely important and landmark shift in the history of India, namely the introduction of the English education system in India? So we will look at the role that Raja Ram Mohan Roy had played based on the historiographical accounts of exactly those times in which Raja Ram Mohan Roy, as well as his contemporaries, both Indian and European, were functioning. The question, to paraphrase it, is, was Ram Mohan the very first proponent or the only native advocate for instituting the English education system, which includes, of course, using English as the medium of instruction across different levels of education, primary, secondary, and higher education? In colonial India, that is really the question with which we are concerned when we try to know or assess the role of Raja Ram Mohan Roy in instituting or bringing in English education in colonial India. And I would like to begin with, again, a quotation which would reflect on the Raja's role from somebody who was the most important academic philosopher in the late 19th and early 20th century. Somebody who had been a precursor to Sarvepalli Radhakrishnan, Dr. Radhakrishnan, who later on became the president of India. So this is from K.C. Bhattacharya, Krishna Chandra Bhattacharya, an eminent Indian philosopher who lived between 1875 and 1949. The time is important because you would get an idea of the specific historical period that he is talking about. And he says about that period regarding the introduction of English education in colonial India, I quote, "I do not mean that it, that is, the entire Western system of education, ideas, and sentiments, I do not mean that it has been imposed on unwilling minds." That's what K.C. Bhattacharya has to say. I do not mean that it has been imposed on unwilling minds. We ourselves asked for this education, and we feel, and perhaps rightly, that it has been a blessing in certain ways, unquote. So this is what K.C. Bhattacharya, a foremost proponent of the new constructive interpretative Indian philosophy in academic philosophy, had to say about the adoption of English education system in colonial India. He says that it was the Indian society, and specifically the Hindu society to which he belonged, that was eager, that was greatly willing, and which itself asked for the adoption of this kind of education, the English education. And he also represents through these words of his, by saying, a particular sentiment he represents, which is to the effect that this adoption of English education has been a blessing in certain ways. So he acknowledges the fact that it has been a blessing. The same way that people like Rishi Bankim Chandra Chattopadhyay have acknowledged the benefits of adopting English education system in India, which is quite evident from his writings, from Rishi Bankim Chandra's writings, in fact, from his essays, and especially if you read his famous novel Anandamat, you would see how enthusiastically Rishi Bankim Chandra Chatterjee was advocating for the adoption of English education, and he even welcomed for a specific purpose, and that of the regeneration of India into the modern age, bringing India out of the clutches of the forces of medievalism into a really poised modern age. Through his powerful writing in novels like Anandamot and several of his essays, including Bharat Kolonko. So Bankim Chandra Chattopadhyay, like K.C. Bhattacharya, was of the opinion that English education has been a blessing. And in fact, the coming of the English, of the British in general, had been a blessing in disguise. So that is just the opinion of these personalities of the Indian Renaissance. I'm just representing their opinions in front of you in order to give you a background of the subject matter that we have taken up for today's discussion. Now, R.C. Majumdar, the famous historian from the 20th century, who has written his phenomenal work on the history of the history and culture of the Indian people. He has captured the genuine public enthusiasm, the kind of enthusiasm that K.C. Bhattacharya, the philosopher, was talking about, or even the kind of enthusiasm that prompted Raja Ram Mohan Rai to take actions in this regard. So R.C. Majumdar has given a very useful account, historical account of this period, the early decades of the 19th century, and especially the first 3 decades, 1800s, 1810s, 1820s. This is prior to 1835, which is the year when, for the first time, there was a government intervention, an intervention by the British colonial government towards the instituting of English education system in India. Now, R.C. Majumdar gives us a fair account of the great mass enthusiasm towards acquiring English education in his the history and culture of the Indian people. And it's from the 10th volume that you can get this particular account of the period regarding English education being adopted by Indians. He has prepared this historiographical account by mainly going through volumes of the newspapers of the period, that is the early decades of the 19th century. And he traces this public enthusiasm for English education to, I quote, exigencies of, that is reasons of, administration and commercial intercourse, unquote, and finds this sort of enthusiasm concentrated in the 3 presidency towns of Calcutta, Bombay, and Madras. So he says that the exigencies, that is the great urgent factors with regard to the administration of the country and commercial activities, carrying out commercial activities, because from that time, and in fact from some centuries before it, India had become open again and greatly open due to the discovery of new sea routes with commercial activities from European countries, and especially from Western European countries like Britain. And this great demand, the urgent factor of carrying out the commercial activities, as well as taking an active part in the administration of the country, had necessitated the Hindu society concentrated in these 3 presidency towns where the English had started their rule for the first time in India, that is Calcutta in Bengal, and Madras in the south, and Bombay in the west. So these people had felt the great need to take up English as a medium of instruction, because that would help them to learn the language in order to interact with Europeans and especially the British, and also to take up the spirit of modernity that the liberal education system practiced in Europe at that time would offer a student. So these 2 factors were important, and it was realized by the Hindu society concentrated in these 3 presidency towns at that time. R.C. Majumdar further notes that by the time the 18th century came to a close and the 19th century began, many Indians in these three presidency towns, especially in Calcutta, because it was the principal center of commercial activities and location for administrative institutions, the people of Calcutta and the other presidency towns came in close contact with educated Englishmen. This made the Indians understand the nature and importance of the English people's distinctive culture, and they realized the necessity of imbibing its spirit through the knowledge of English, something that I was mentioning a while ago. The inevitable consequence of such intermingling and close acquaintance between the Indians and the English was the mushrooming of schools for teaching English. It began with establishing such schools in various locations in Calcutta and the suburbs surrounding Calcutta. For example, at Bhawanipur in Calcutta, a school had come up right at the last year of the 18th century, namely in the 1800 CE. Within 17 years of that first school coming up at Bhawanipur in Kolkata or Calcutta, a concentrated effort became palpable, an effort towards the spread of English education. And this was most acutely felt in Bengal, especially in our urban and semi-urban areas. In most cases, such effort to set up schools which would offer English as a medium of instruction, as well as the liberal education system in Europe, was jointly led by Europeans as well as Indians. And these were entirely private in nature. This is a very, very important aspect. Up to 1835, that is the year when the government finally took a step towards making or rolling out policies on education and regulating it, all the efforts at setting up English schools, schools where English language would be taught and European liberal system of education would be offered, a liberal curriculum would be offered. Such schools or institutions were coming up as the result of efforts from private individuals and private organizations and not from the government. This is something that R.C. Majumdar has highlighted very well through his historical account of this period. Now, Raja Ram Mohan Roy, his specific role, because it is our main concern, arrives to permanently live in Calcutta, in the city, in the year 1816. Before that, he had come to the city on a few occasions, starting from 1814, that is 2 years prior to when he started permanently living in Calcutta by buying a house at Maniktola in northern Calcutta. Before his arrival in the city, several schools in the city, in Calcutta, that were offering courses on the English language and grammar. So we get to see that even before Raja Ram Mohan Roy had arrived in Calcutta and started his activities with full enthusiasm, several schools which were offering English education had already come up in the city. After arriving in Calcutta, Raja Ram Mohan Roy founded a school near Hedua in North Calcutta in the year 1816, the same year when he arrived here. There were 200 odd students studying at this school set up by the Raja. In the year 1817, two notable institutions for the proliferation of English education came into being. These are, first, the Calcutta School Book Society, and secondly, the Hindu College. The object of the Calcutta School Book Society, the first of these two institutions, was to make available good textbooks, both in English and in Indian languages, such as in Bangla, suitable for schools. The society undertook to prepare such textbooks and to print and publish them. The printing press, by the way, had already arrived in Calcutta a few years prior to this, because of which, as I have discussed in my previous talk on Raja Ram Mohan at Sangam, Raja Ram Mohan Roy himself could publish several of his translations of the Upanishads and the Brahma Sutra. And these textbooks that the Calcutta School Book Society had published were sold at a cheap price and sometimes distributed free, as we can see from the historiographical account prepared by R.C. Majumdar. The committee members of the Calcutta School Book Society soon felt the need of good schools for teaching English. As a result of their efforts, that is the society's efforts, in 1818, the Calcutta School Society came into being. Another society comes into being. The objective of this new society, namely the Calcutta School Society, were to help and improve the schools already existing in Calcutta and to establish new schools according to need. It was jointly headed, this particular society called Calcutta School Society, to set up new schools and looking after existing schools. It was jointly headed by Raja Radhakantadev, who in fact was the leader of Orthodox Hindus of Calcutta and Bengal, and the Scottish philanthropist David Hare. Raja Radhakantadev, I should note here, had been against Raja Ram Mohan Roy's activities on many regards, especially with regard to social and religious reformation. So it is important to note for us, in order to understand the role that Raja Ram Mohan Roy played in bringing or advocating for English education in colonial India, the role that his opponents, his contemporaries in general had played, and his opponents in particular had played. Opponents like Raja Radhakantadev, the leader of Orthodox Hindus of Calcutta and Bengal. What was the Raja's association with these institutions that I just named? In 1817, in the year of its founding, the Calcutta School Book Society requested the Raja's assistance in preparing textbooks, Raja Ram Mohan Roy's assistance. Upon their request, the Raja wrote a Bengali textbook on geography and translated it into English as well. He also translated a pre-existing textbook on astronomy into Bangla and titled it Khagol Vigyan or Khagol Vigyana. Asi Majumdar writes, by far the most important institution that helped the spread of English education in Bengal was Hindu College, established in Calcutta on January 20, 1870. This was a landmark event in the proliferation of English education in India. Majumdar discusses the origin of this institution at some length because, as he notes, there is a great deal of misconception regarding the foundation of this college. And one major misconception regarding the foundation of this college pertains to the role of Raja Ram Mohan Roy. This is why we will also, like Majumdar, discuss it at some length. By going through documents that are contemporary to the era of the Hindu college's birth, Majumdar presents a brief but interesting history of the circumstances that led to its founding. In the process, he concludes that it was certainly not Raja Ram Mohan Roy who had taken the initiative to set up this institution. However, the circumstances of the founding of the Hindu College tells us a great deal about the general enthusiasm among the Bengali Hindu public for the adoption of English education in the place of the traditional pre-existing Sanskrit or Perso-Arabic education prevalent in that era. Majumdar writes, please pay attention, but by far the most important institution that helped the spread of English education in Bengal was the Hindu College established in Calcutta on January 20, 1870. As there is a great deal of misconception regarding the foundation of this college, it is necessary to refer briefly to the circumstances which led to it as authenticated by contemporary documents. And these documents happen to be published by the Journal of Asiatic Society. It appears that about the beginning of May 1816, a Brahmin of Calcutta saw Sir Edward Hydeist, Chief Justice of the Supreme Court of Calcutta, and informed him that many of the leading Hindus were desirous of forming an establishment for the education of their children in a liberal manner, as practiced by Europeans, and desired him, that is Sir Hydeist, to hold a meeting for this express purpose. And accordingly, Sir Hydeist, with the permission of the Governor General and the Supreme Council, the Chief Justice of Calcutta called a meeting at his house on 14th of May, 1816, at which 50 and upwards of the most respectable Hindu inhabitants of rank or wealth attended, including also the principal Pandits, when a sum of nearly 500,000 rupees was subscribed and many more subscriptions were promised. R.C. Majumdar continues, the above account is taken almost verbatim from a letter dated 18th of May, 1816, written by Sir Hyde East to his friend Mr. J. Harrington, a brother church then in England. The Brahmin who first suggested to him about the institution is not named in the letter, but Sir Hyde East says that he knew him. It has been generally supposed that this person is no other than Raja Ram Mohan Roy, and consequently, he has been regarded as the founder or promoter of the Hindu College. This view is, however, certainly wrong, R.C. Majumdar says, for later in the same letter, Sir Hyde East categorically says that he did not know Raja Ram Mohan Roy. The Brahmin who saw Sir Hyde East seems to be no other than Boidyanath Mukherjee, a well-known citizen of Calcutta at that time. The meeting, Majumdar continues, decided to establish a college housed in its own building with the object of teaching Bengali, Hindustani, and English languages. Hindustani is, in fact, Hindi. And then Persian, if desired, that is as an optional, and then arithmetic, history, geography, astronomy, mathematics. And in time, as the fund increases, English belles-lettres, poetry, English literature, etc. Stress was also to be laid on teaching the English system of morals. Sir Hyde East observes, one of the singularities of the meeting was that it was composed of persons of various castes, all combining for such a purpose, whom nothing else could have brought together, whose children are to be taught, though not fed, together. This is extremely important, in my view, in the historiographical account of the early 19th century with regard to how enthusiastic the general public and especially the Hindu society of Calcutta was in adopting the English education system and acquiring English language. And Sir Hyde East goes on to observe, as reported by R.C. Majumdar, another singularity of that meeting, which led to the foundation of the Hindu College, was that the most distinguished Pandits, this is very important, the most distinguished Pandits who attended declared their warm approbation of all the objects proposed in that meeting. And when they were about to depart, the head Pandit, in the name of himself and of others, said that they rejoiced in having lived to see the day when literature, many parts of which had formerly been cultivated in their country with considerable success, but which were now nearly extinct, was about to be revived with greater luster and prospect of success than ever. By the way, literature here means, in the usage of that time, in the English usage of early 19th century, literature simply means knowledge in various areas, including the sciences. So this is what the head Pandit, who had been to Sir Hyde East's residence to attend the meeting which led to the foundation of Hindu College, had to say about the revival of knowledge in general through the adoption of English education in India. Remember, this is a traditionally trained Sanskrit Pandit, no less. Now, Majumdar continues, anyone who goes through the newspapers of the period cannot fail to be struck with the genuine enthusiasm which the foundation of these schools evoked in the mind of the public, and a sincere desire to multiply their number in order to meet a keenly felt need for liberal education. There were no less than 25 such schools already in Calcutta alone before 1835, when the government ultimately decided to extend its patronage to English education. Large numbers of such institutions were also founded outside Calcutta. Macaulay, writing in 1836, stated that he had found in one town alone in Bengal 1,400 boys learning English. Now, all institutions for imparting education, for imparting English education in particular, that came up in this period, that is before 1835, were, according to Majumdar, founded by private efforts. This is something that has to be highlighted very well. And both Englishmen and Indians cooperated in this work of setting up these English education institutions. Some prominent institutions imparting English education that came up at this period happen to be these: the Baptist Mission College at Srirampur, established in 1818, the Duff School, the Hare School, established by the Scottish philanthropist David Hare, Raja Ram Mohan Roy's own school at Hedua, located in North Calcutta, G.A. Turnbull's school, a college established by the Lord Bishop of Calcutta in 1820, the Oriental Seminary by Gaur Mohan Attho in 1828, and the General Assembly Institution by Duff, 1830. Majumdar also informs us that the students of the Hindu College who are passing out, who are graduating from the Hindu College, took a leading part in their turn in establishing more schools. And in 1831, this is still before 1835, the government intervention in education policy regarding English, there were 6 morning schools, as many as 6 morning schools in different parts of Calcutta, all opened by one or the other students who had, former students who had graduated from the Hindu College in different parts of Calcutta, founded and managed solely by such graduates of the Hindu College. Now, what subjects were taught in such institutions that came up before 1835 in Calcutta and other parts of Bengal that was set up by various private individuals and organizations? What did their curricula look like? That is a valid question. The curricula were typically inspired by European-style liberal education, but one that easily appealed to the Indian mind, which was hungry for knowledge at that point in time in history. As such, liberal education models were not at all unknown to the Indian in the ancient and medieval pre-modern times. They simply saw the reintroduction of a similar ideal that their ancestors and they themselves had held up, that they had upheld. And in order to be in sync with the modern age spirit, they merely wanted to go back to that system, which was now available through the English language as well as the English system of education. Majumdar writes, there are occasional references to various subjects taught in these schools. These included, besides the knowledge of English literature and grammar, mathematics, astronomy, geography, chemistry, both theoretical and practical, philosophy, both Indian and European philosophy, history, ancient as well as modern, painting, handwriting, and various arts and crafts. By this time, Raja Ram Mohan Roy had already left Calcutta for England. He had left on November 15th in the year 1830, never to return, as he passed away in England in 1833. So what is the conclusion from all of this? It therefore follows that the enlightened Hindus at the beginning of the 19th century adopted English education out of their own free will and positive enthusiasm to make sure that they are on par with an increasingly global sphere of knowledge by acquiring the latest form of liberal education, that is, of the European manner. And so that they, equipped and well-versed with the latest forms of knowledge, as well as the knowledge of the English language, a global language, can fully and equally participate in the administration of their country. So in the Indian context, English was important, but also on a global context, English was becoming fast a vehicle of communication between various nationalities. And therefore, the Hindu society of that time, at the beginning of the 19th century, understood its importance and thereby adopted it. Raja Ram Mohan Roy merely gave voice to the will of the Hindu society, which he came to represent by the 1820s, by virtue of his profound knowledge of the Hindu Shastras and foreign languages, such as English, Persian, Greek, Latin, and Hebrew. Because of his great scholarship and his very public outlook, he was actively participating in debates with all sorts of people, including the Christian missionaries, Europeans, Indians, Sanskrit Pandits, the Orthodox Hindus, all of them were, to a great extent, they were in awe of the Raja. And therefore, the Raja's influence in his contemporary society was palpable. Therefore, he naturally came to be a representative. And he took up that particular mantle on himself when he wrote to Lord Amherst. The voicing of the general will of the Hindus desirous of adopting the English education system in the place of the former traditional systems of Sanskrit and Perso-Arabic education found articulation in the Raja's letter to Lord Amherst, the Governor General, in 1823. However, it must be noted, very important as well, that the adoption of the 1835 British policy on education, which was endorsed and pushed for by Macaulay, was largely an initiative of Lord Bentinck, who was zealously enthusiastic about bringing in the English education system and who became Governor General of India in 1834, a year after the Raja's passing. Lord Bentinck was of the opinion that English education system would do good to Indians. But it has also to be pointed out when I mention this, that Lord Bentinck did not take a proactive role in order to impose this policy. It was only when the ground was prepared, when the demand from the Indians and especially from the Hindu society was palpable, that Macaulay gave voice to it in 1835, and as a result of that, Bentinck simply took the opportunity of fulfilling his desire. So this is the role. This historical account would give you a fair share, I hope, of the idea, a fair idea of the role that Raja Ram Mohan Rai played regarding instituting the English education system in colonial India.